For parliamentary bill in the upper house for a rollover of existing overdraft facilities that are at the various commercial banks named in the motion. It is a normal process for motions of that nature to be tabled in this honorable house for debate and approval. My knowledge and experience in banking has equipped me to understand and appreciate the need for such motions to be tabled here, Mr. President. Overdraft facilities are short-term in nature. Short-term meaning they are approved for a maximum term of 12 months. Sometimes there are requirements for interim reviews, sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months. But at the end of every term, those facilities have to be reviewed by the banking sector and either approved or the debt is called in. In this particular case, in the case of government, the Finance Administration Act requires that in the case of overdraft facilities or any debt for that matter, resolutions come here before the House such that the banks have the authority to continue to extend the overdraft facilities to government or whatever the case may be. So, therefore, my concern does not relate to the bill itself. It doesn't relate to the bill itself because, Mr. President, if the banks have to comply with the law, if they do not receive a resolution from the House, they have to call in the debt. Otherwise, the bank will be exposed to significant risk. Government, on the other hand, if they do not get parliamentary approval, they will not be in compliance with the law neither, and they will not have that resolution to give to the banking sector. So this is a normal requirement. My concern is more about the fact that I am thinking that discussions and debates on the budget for the new fiscal period is imminent, and I believe at this point in time there's probably a lot of robust action in government to prepare the fiscal budget and review our performance during the last fiscal period. I am looking forward to that debate. I'm looking forward to the tabling of the budget. I'm looking forward to participating in the debate on the estimates and expenditure. And I want to take this opportunity, I think I've mentioned it several times in the House before, that there is a need for the Ministry of Finance and the persons participating in preparation of the fiscal budget to undertake the required analysis. SWOT, we've spoken about SWOT in the House before, I've also spoken about the PEST analysis. Those analyses that would guide the government in terms of how to deal with the fiscal situation of this country. We'll recall that IMF has cautioned several times about the level of debt in the country and has made recommendations for reduction of those debts. So I am looking forward to the opportunity to have a look or to participate in the budgetary process, and I would implore our Minister of Finance to ensure that when that exercise is done, we are not only given figures, but we are given the underlying assumptions, we are given details as to what analysis was done to arrive at the figures, and also to tell us what outcomes that we are expecting when the figures are presented and when the budget is implemented. So I am very much looking forward to that, Mr. President. As an independent senator, I think it is very important that I consult with various stakeholders to get their own input as to what they believe government should include in the budget for their social and economic well-being. And I have started the consultation process such that I can have share that input with the Minister of Finance, so that at the end of the day, when I stand in the House and I speak or I participate in the debate, I will be doing so in a rather informed manner, and in a manner which will ensure that I'm representing the interests of the voiceless in St. Lucia, the interests of persons who are not color-coded, if I may say, because there are lots of people who do not have the avenue to be able to articulate what their needs are, and I would like to do so on their behalf effectively, Mr. President. I thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business, Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to wish all my colleagues good morning. The year ended, 2017 ended on a very emotional note for me, and having lost my dear mom. It was a trying time, and I want to thank all parliamentarians, both of the upper house and lower house, for giving me the support during that time. I think if my mom could have reacted and made a statement, she would have said, well, it was well done. So thanks to everybody that who came out to make my mourning a little more palatable. I'm not a very religious individual, but I wanted to start my presentation by quoting a little piece of scripture. And I'm trying to get it, and I'm not seeing it. But I have it now. Proverbs 21:23, and says, whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles. Amen. And so I want to start my presentation that way. Mr. President, there will never be a good time for borrowing. As a matter of fact, we should always aim to be in a position that there is no need for us to borrow. But the reality is such that when you are managing a country, there will always be a time to borrow. The leader of opposition business indicated that the Honorable Prime Minister said during his campaign, and that has been bandied around for so many times. And I wonder, what do we as a government have to do to disabuse the minds of the opposition that it was not so? I recall very vividly that the Prime Minister said that he will not borrow unless he can identify a stream of revenue for repayment. And that is manifested in the gas tax. And this is actually done so that we can get the loan from our friends Taiwan to deal with the roads. And here it is, the Department of Infrastructure 2018 project digest. Theme, working for you. And Mr. President, I think everybody has a copy of this document. This is works. Works. We will get to Denver Village. So, Mr. President, so we come here, and like we said, it's not a good thing to borrow, but we have to borrow. My friend, who is an ex-teacher and principal, talked about the sports meet. And just like me, I'm very ardent sportsman, and I follow the sports very regularly, especially around this time of the year. But they keep harping on the fact that we have problems presently with some of the sports meets. And some of the facilities like Darren Sami and Minder Phillip Park could not have been used because of lack of water. and want to blame the government for that. Mr. President, I was the chairman of St. Lucia Sports, Inc. for almost 2 years in a previous life, when I was a member of the other side, and I was the chairman. And every year, I had to go to the Honorable Sean Edwards, who was the Minister of Sport, to make sure that I would get some money after we were threatened by the public utilities, Lucilec and Wasco, shutting down the facilities. That's a perennial problem. It happens all the time. And we have to be fair that we have a Darren Sammy Stadium which does not make money. When I was the chairman of Sports Inc., we spent almost $1.5 million preparing Darren Sammy grounds for the World Cup. Australia playing Pakistan here in St. Lucia. And all we got back from the West Indies Cricket Board was about $300,000. It is not feasible to keep that sort of activity at Bosseju. It is better when Bosseju makes, in fact, Darren Sammy Stadium makes more money when we play football at the stadium. And it was not built specifically for football. It was built for cricket. So I think we need to get away from blaming governments because of that situation there. These facilities do not make sufficient money to be self-sufficient. Is that? Yeah, I mean, I agree in management, and during my time, if you notice that at Darren Sammy Stadium, we started having shows, Red International, and I negotiated, okay, that Red International would have their show there, it would be their home. I was even chastised once for charging them an exorbitant amount of money when they thought it was an exorbitant amount of money from a member of the opposite side. At that time, he was into West Indies cricket and so on. But that was the future I was seeing for Darren Sammy Stadium. It has stopped. But we need to resuscitate Darren Sammy Stadium so that it can be self-sufficient. So do not blame governments for the problems that we are usually having around this time. And if you notice, Mr. President, the utilities do that at this particular time because they know we care about our children. They know it's the time when sports is on, and this is a way of forcing the government to pay. That's just tactics. So don't blame the government. The honorable leader of government opposition, of the opposition side, talked about climate change and resilience. And I agree with him 100% that we have to start looking at this. But do not say that in the manner in which he's saying it, as if the government, 1 year and 6 months into its reign, that we can do everything, that we can break down some of the houses that are not going to be able to withstand 150 miles an hour winds and rebuild immediately. That is not going to happen. But my chairman here from NDC will give a little synopsis of what we are doing so that our houses are going to be hurricane resilient. That is how we're going to move. If you look at the Millennium Highway, you will see the amount of work that is being done there. When you do come traveling from south to north and you enter the first tunnel and you look, you can see the brightness of the Millennium Highway. Again, we are trying to do these sort of things so that if there is a hurricane, we would not have too much debris on our highway. But it's continued, and we are doing it island-wide in preparation of our hurricane season. We talked about transparency and accountability and the St. Jude's inquiry, and up to now we have not tabled anything. There was an investigation done into the conduct of Honorable Guy Joseph, one of the most eloquent or most efficient fraud investigators from America, was brought here at Linquist at the cost of $3 million, and St. Lucians don't know anything about it. Where is the report? Where is the report that was done on Honorable Guy Joseph? That's a question. Just a question. We then had the River Dorero lands. If we had paid the court decision a few years ago, which was $3 million, we would not have to pay now $6 million. This is the accountability and transparency that we talk about. And I'm happy that the opposition is now clamoring for transparency and accountability. It is good. And we are doing that in the way forward, that we are going to tell St. Lucians whatever we are going to do. St. Jude's inquiry, we didn't hide it. Everybody knows there's an inquiry going on. And there's a further inquiry going on. Because action has to be taken. The time for just speaking about those sort of things and passing the buck or hiding it has to stop. Has to stop. And you will see at the end of the day what will happen with the St. Jude's inquiry. And there are more inquiries that to come, you know. But that's for another time. Mr. President, before I end, I want to thank the Commissioner of Police and police officers. I think the year has started in a very positive manner. You see the police officers on the streets now. They are doing the roadblocks, and they are successful. And I'm praying and encouraging the Commissioner and the members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force to continue in that vein. We now start seeing a little confidence from the public into the affairs of the police. And like I have told them, some people ask for restore confidence. And I've said to the police officers, what you do on a daily basis will restore the confidence of the public in you. So I want to thank them, and I hope that we continue with the good work that they're doing. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister. Senator Gideon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to firstly, again, share my condolences with Senator Francis, and also for the many lives that have been lost so far, or in particular the commencement of the year, especially two of the promising individuals or young men of our community. I also want to let St. Lucians know that yes, we are celebrating soon the 39th anniversary of our independence, and I think this is a time where we ought to think, we ought to sit down and take a look at where we are as a country. What is it that we've done thus far in these 49 years that really makes St. Lucia stand out? And as a sports enthusiast, I would say that I think to a certain extent in the sporting fields that we have been able to do well enough. Not that it is satisfactory, but it is well enough in the sense that we've had a few of our athletes representing sports at the highest level. And as I've always said, with a little more support from government, that these athletes will see it necessary that when they go out and they become victorious in the sense of maybe acquiring a sponsorship, acquiring some affiliation with an outside team, be it the West Indies or some other football club or whatever, that they see it necessary to come back and help other St. Lucians rise to the occasion and live in the limelight. The Minister in the Ministry of Sports, Senator Belrose, said that the theme for the independence this year would remain the same as last year. I am St. Lucia. And he says that, she said that it emits confidence and pride, a sense of belongingness, a sense of spiritual awakening, and all of these. But the question I asked to myself was, really, if these are being seen in St. Lucian's, is there that spirit of confidence? Is there that spirit of pride, of belongingness, to say, yes, today I'm proud to be St. Lucian? Is there this bubbling affection for St. Lucia? I don't know, but I know for sure in my constituency, it's not, my fishermen are not saying this. The constituency which I vied for a correction. The fishermen there are not saying so, because every single day, when I walk through Denver South, I go to the beachfront, I go to the project called the Daito. Yeah, I get fishermen approaching me and saying, don't forget, tell the government, don't forget, let them know that we need what is ours in order to survive. And I said that it is not just money for money's sake, but this money, when they receive it, it is being circulated right there in the community or in the constituency. And I told them I can only speak. I cannot force, I cannot make, I can only speak. But I want to say this morning that the sense of pride and belongingness to be St. Lucia, to be a St. Lucian, it is not with our people. It is not. The cries of the people far outweighs that sense of belongingness and that sense of St. Lucianness. And if, as a government, we say we love our people, I think the time has come where we need to take a look, take a look. Those of you who do not want to stand and speak for your people of St. Lucia.
Just to remind you that what we debating this morning is not the statement made by the minister,
Yes,
but by the resolution. So I'd like you to get back to the resolution.
It's all connected. Because the monies we are borrowing, just $55 million we are borrowing, will it make St. Lucians happier? It will. Yes. How? How? Okay? And so, we need to understand, yes, it is normal that we come in, we borrow. I don't have a problem with this. And I'm sure those of us on this side don't have a problem with it. We don't have a problem. It is. But a country that is said to be on its way to recovery. Yeah, it's on its way to recovery. 2% growth. Minister of Tourism said that numbers in tourism arrivals has never been seen. If this is so, then where is the flow? Where is the economic flow? Where is the economic flow? Who benefits? Who benefits? Where is the economic flow? Where is it? I live in St. Lucia, and I cannot see it among the poor. I cannot see it among the St. Lucians. I cannot see it. It is not visible. And if we keep talking, yeah, because you see, that is the thing. We speak one way, yes, and we expect all St. Lucians to just join in and say, yes, it is happening. It is happening. You don't speak to the common person on the streets. You don't. And so, I want to say that if St. Lucia is supposed to be the island it is supposed to be, I think as a government, our debt to GDP ratio, our economic organizations have spoken. They warned us about certain things. We never took heed because we think that we have the key and we have the answers to all. But only time will tell. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. And so, Mr. President, I want to say that the leader of government business this morning, he made the point that the overdraft is at 0%. No one is doubting him. He said no one is doubting him, but these are your words. And as was said, if you are coming to the House to present an information, you just don't speak it out. You don't speak it out. You give us proof. Give me proof that I can go and say, yes, here it is. Give me proof. Don't tell me it is 0% or it's at zero, and then there's nothing to show. There's nothing to tell me go to the bank for it. I wasn't the one who brought it. You brought it. So therefore, you have to now show me that it is at zero. Don't tell me the bank it is at zero. We deal with evidence. We don't speak with, we don't come here and say things just blaring it out of our mouths and then we have nothing to substantiate. We need the evidence. And so, I think I am duty bound and I'm right to ask for that information. I am right to ask for the information. And so, Mr. President, going out and borrowing is not the issue. That is not the issue. The issue is not the borrowing. It's not the issue. Because all governments borrow. All governments borrow. He made a point that before it was at 25 million, and today it's at 55. I need to make a point on this. If you said that your economy is growing, why now do you have to go to the 55? Because it was put at 55. No. We brought it to 55. But do you have to take it at 55? Show us that you are different. Show that you are different. So you need the maximum. You need it. That is why you go for it. You need it. You need it. If it's at 25, it was brought to 55 by the former government. Show that you are different. Say we do not want the 55, we will go back to 25. Show it. Show it, and that is what that's a common sense that the person on the streets will understand. You say we brought it at 55. Well, I don't need 55 million. I need only 25. I will take 25. You take the maximum. You take the maximum, and then you're going to say that if we do not need it, we won't use it all. Take what you need. So because it's the maximum, you take the maximum. So you're making money, yes. You're still going to borrow money. If you're making, why borrow? If you are making, why borrow? You don't need to borrow because you are making. Yeah, you are making. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I am saying that we have a right to seek for answers, and we will continue to seek for answers. We have a right to ask questions, and we will ask questions. If we have a statement to make, we will make that statement. And so I'm saying that just as the independent senator said, that yes, there's nothing wrong, but we are monitoring. We are monitoring. My level of finances will help me monitor. I will monitor. And when the time comes to make the statements, it will be made. And so, if this money, the overdraft, is being placed there, and then it's been used for some other reason other than what is intended, it will come out. It will come out. We cannot hide from the people all the time. The truth will come out. And so we continue to monitor. And that is the responsibility of those of us on this side, is to monitor and to give the advance warning that when things are not going right, we have a right to speak about it. We have a right to stand and say it is not going right. And so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, we have more to say. I have more to say. I have more to say. But at this moment, I wait, I watch, and then at the appointed time, the statements will be made. Thank you.
Senator Manga.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity to wish the people of this wonderful country of ours, St. Lucia, a pleasant 49th independent anniversary.
Senator Gideon, please turn off your line.
Mr. President, we are a growing nation. We are a young adult, and of course, I believe we have done the necessary strides over the years. But there is a lot more to be done in this country, Mr. President. And this is why today I stand in support of the government's resolution to borrow $55 million by virtue of an overdraft facility. Mr. President, today I intended to sit down and to just relax and to listen, because my voice is not the best, having just recovered from the flu. But then I listened to the members opposite, and I listened to especially the leader of the opposition business. And I felt that I needed to speak today to clarify a number of issues and to specify exactly the government's position and where we're going with this country and where we are headed, Mr. President. You've heard the senator, the independent senator, who's a banking expert, inform you that an overdraft facility is nothing new. An overdraft is for a period of time, and the government is simply coming back to this house to renew what is an existing facility. You've heard the leader of government business, Mr. President, mention that the present status of this overdraft is zero. And I must applaud this government for maintaining such prudence in the management of the finances of the business of this country. Because a lot of the times when we have money, Mr. President, we tend to believe that we are very comfortable and we go out and spend that money, especially whether it is our money or whether it is borrowed money. So the government has exercised prudence in the finances of this country by ensuring that the overdraft facility is presently at zero. But Mr. President, in every organization, in business, in religious organizations, in schools, etc., there is also always the need for a buffer. And when I use the word buffer, I expect, of course, the member of the leader of the opposition business will understand that. We always need to have a reserve or facility for unforeseen circumstances. And those unforeseen circumstances may come at any time, such as in the expectations
or the case of Dominica, just like he previously mentioned. So, Mr. President, this government, in not only exercising its prudence in the finances of this country, but in the proper planning of how this country should be managed and operated, saw the wisdom in ensuring that such an approval, just the approval, is obtained from this House and the Senate in order that the necessary legislation is in place just should in case that such a facility is required or is needed for it to be used as a buffer facility to help in augmenting or smoothing down any ruffles that may come across in the operation of the finances of this government, Mr. President. The leader of the opposition business again stated that it is easy to win elections, but it is difficult to govern. Now, if we were to take his statement as being correct and truthful, I'm not saying that is the case, but if we were to take it as being correct and truthful, then it simply means that, Mr. President, while he and his team cannot obtain the simple objective of winning an election, because they did not win the last election. So why they cannot obtain the objective of winning or doing a simple task by winning an election, the people of this country has entrusted us in the government side with the most difficult task to govern the country, Mr. President. And this is what we are doing, Mr. President. We are governing this country and doing the most difficult task successfully and doing it in the best interest of the people of this country. This is what we're doing, Mr. President. This is what we're doing. And this is what we'll continue to do. So while they're still trying to develop the formula to obtaining the simple task, which they cannot obtain, we will continue to govern this country and do the most difficult task for years to come. So, Mr. President, I know the difficult task of rebuilding a country, especially after a hurricane. I've seen the situation in Dominica, and I'm very thankful that the leader of the opposition business could use his talents in assisting the people of Dominica, and I'm very happy that he's doing that. And he's very concerned, having seen what he has seen in Dominica, that should the same happen to us in St. Lucia, are we ready? Are we ready? And I agree with him that we're not ready, but we are getting there, Mr. President. But by what process are we getting there? Let us make the comparison. In the last 20 years, Mr. President, they governed this country for 15 out of the last 20. Yet still, in the 15 they governed this country, they never saw it fit to support the simplest of legislation to allow the technical people to be able to enforce this legislation in providing resilient structures in this country. Mr. President, and I refer to the draft building code. We've had a draft building code in this country for over 20 years, or for 20 years. Did they ever make it law? Did they ever make this draft building code law? No. So if you do not make it law, how do you go out there and enforce this legislation to ensure that we have resilient structures in this country, Mr. President? But I must tell him that we need again to make the comparison, Mr. President. Let us look at what they've done, and let us look at what we are doing. Right now, Mr. President, you could see there is this handbook from the Ministry of Infrastructure. The works. There is this handbook. And this handbook could identify to you what exactly we're doing. In that time, Mr. President, a lot of the infrastructural works being done, the primary infrastructural works in this country, is cheap and spray. Roads that would last 3 years or less. And then we have to go back and do it over again. But you could see the results of the Diga Road Rehabilitation Project. We in this government side, Mr. President, we are already building resilient structures in this country. We are already building resilient structures. We are doing concrete. I will come to the part when you talk about direct award. I will come to it. But we are building resilient structures. Concrete roads, Mr. President. Concrete drains that will last us for generations and generations to come. That is what we're doing in this country. Forestier housing development is another typical example. We have done a project which is second to none in this country in Forestier. We've done this. We've done proper infrastructure. So we are already preparing resilient structures in this country, Mr. President. And under our able Minister of Housing, the Honorable Guy Joseph, and through the National Housing Corporation, Mr. President, there are a number of projects to come in this country where we will recognize a difference in the approach and in the structural integrity and strength of our projects and our buildings in this country, Mr. President. And I make reference to Talvan, Mr. President. Let us look at Talvan. For years, under the last administration, they went to the people of Foaso and Talvan and tell them that we will subdivide and give you the lands that you're living on. We will do this, Mr. President. We will do that. Did they achieve it? No. They achieved absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, what they did, Mr. President, in their anxiety, right, and in their recklessness, I should say, of trying to do something they had no formula in being able to achieve, they went and committed those lands in Talvan to a foreigner. And in the contractual arrangement, indicated that this particular entity will sell or must get commitment from poor St. Lucians, a commitment of purchasing over 60% of the development before that entity could put one peg or spend $1 in the development. Is that prudent management of this economy and prudent management of the finances and developing in the best interest of our people? No, Mr. President. So this is what they did. This is what they did. But we were able to come in, and in no time I could report to this Honorable House. As of Thursday last week, we were having a town hall meeting down in Babono, and we were able to indicate to the people that these lands will be made available to them almost effective immediately for purchase. And so we have gotten the DCA approval, Mr. President. We have started the process of rationalization, and surveyors are on the ground cutting those properties for these people. And of course, we're going to have the shock development project. That particular area, shock development, is an area where they have tried many times in the past to develop. But but they have failed to do so. So we, Mr. President, will be able to proceed. We have started the process of designing, and in that process of designing, we are taking into consideration resilient structures, resilient development. And we'll be able to show this country and St. Lucians that they will be able to invest in a product that is affordable, and most of all, a product that is safe for its people, Mr. President. We are growing this economy, Mr. President. And I hear about this $55 million, what it will do for St. Lucia, whether there'll be jobs, what exactly will be done. Well, I think all you need to do is to look at what is happening with this economy. And the answer is right there. The answer is right there, Mr. President. We are growing this economy. The statistics are showing that there is less unemployment in this country now than when we came into office. This is what we're doing, and this is what we'll continue to do. So when we take a facility of $55 million as a buffer, we are simply indicating that, listen, as we grow this economy, as we provide more employment, there may be the need for us to be able to fill a few areas. Not block a hole for $5, because that may not be possible. But there may be certain areas where we may need to fill and smoothen certain paths. And we are simply taking the prudent step in managing this affair and in ensuring that the facilities are available for us to do that. Mr. President, I listened to part of the debate in the lower house, and I was rather disappointed to hear a certain member of the lower house make reference to the Diga Road project and say that the design component of the Diga Road project is $5 million or thereabout. Obviously making reference to what he had listened to or heard on a certain famous talk show in St. Lucia. $5 million they proclaim. Mr. President, this is so erroneous, so out of truth. This Diga Road project design component did not cost anything close to $5 million. Neither did it cost $1 million. As a matter of fact, it did not even cost $500,000. And I will go further to say that it has cost less than $460,000, the design and financing of this road. This is what it is. Do your research. The information is there, and find out what it is. Less than that. But let us compare, Mr. President. Let us make the comparison. Let us make the comparison. Normally in a contract like this one, where the contractor will design, finance, and build, the cost of design and implementation, the cost of design and supervision would be in excess of 10% of the contract cost. And the leader of the government, the leader of the opposition business knows exactly what I'm saying. Because he knows that there are professional organizations in the building field here that is charging 10% for design and supervision. He knows that very well. So the cost of design and supervision will be in excess of 10%. The project cost, Mr. President, is around $15 million. So design and supervision should be around $1.5 million if it would be 10%. So it is not 10%. It is not even 5%. As a matter of fact, it is less than 3.5% of the cost of the contract. This is how prudent this government is, Mr. President. And then you want to, I heard the statement that there is nothing to design. It is just a road you go and you pave back. What do you pave back? 2 bridges, 2 new bridges designed and built. Road elevations created over 2 meters. New box culverts, plenty of new box culverts. A lot of areas cut and filled, Mr. President. So really and truly, a lot of the untruths that are going out in this country needs to be challenged and needs to be tackled accordingly. And Mr. President, I am very grateful that this government is managing the affairs and the finances of this country prudently. And I am when I sat here this morning and I heard the leader of government business indicate that the present overdraft is at 0, I felt heartened. I felt very comfortable. Because most of the time, the norm would be that we bring the overdraft facility to its maximum, to its peak. And when it gets to that point, this is when we felt, well, we are in some sort of trouble, so we're taking a reactive measure than rather being proactive. But this government, Mr. President, is proactive in taking the necessary measures, in foreseeing that if there are any unforeseen circumstances, it will be able to ride the tide and comfort itself. So I stand here, Mr. President, in full support of this motion, and I am saying, again, congratulations to the Minister for Finance and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance for managing the affairs of this country properly, and I'm in full support of this motion. I thank you.
Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, fellow senators. I too want to lend my voice to those who have gone before me, my fellow senators, in wishing every St. Lucian a happy independence. I stand here, Mr. President, to support this bill, this motion, requesting a fluctuating overdraft of $55 million Sometimes, Mr. President, I wonder if we really understand, some of us really understand, what it is that's required here of us. I mean, when I hear people asking for what is going to be done with an overdraft, it makes me wonder. It makes me think that they do not understand the purpose of an overdraft. Government cannot come here and say to you, we are going to build a road or a school or this and that with a fluctuating overdraft. They cannot, because that overdraft is just a precautionary measure. So I am hoping that in our quest to create mischief, we are just carrying on and on. Because I believe at this level, Mr. President, we all ought to know what a fluctuating overdraft is. And I don't get a sense that many of the people who are questioning this borrowing understand what this is about. And again, our leader of government business has already established that this is a routine occurrence. Routine both when the former administration was in office and now. And it is going to continue to be a routine occurrence because it is a precautionary measure. Okay? So, Mr. President, I believe, and like my fellow senator said when he started, we just use these opportunities to create rancor and ruckus in this house, in this honorable house. It is nothing more. And when he mentioned that we have two teachers who are senators sitting in this house, he was right. He was right in pointing out that you are teachers. You are responsible for structuring your minds. And for you to come here and be wasting so much time over borrowing $55 million that your administration put in place because it was a necessity at the time. For you to come here and be debating that, I mean, come on. Come on, Mr. President. We can rise above that, especially in the upper house. We are not the upper house by mistake. We are not in the upper house by mistake. So, Mr. President, then I heard about then I heard how many other ministers in the former administration who made the same pronouncement. This is a routine, a routine request. And I am still surprised that this created so much debate in the lower house. And people keep asking, Mr. President, what is it for? What is it for? What is it for? Mr. President, I believe I need some protection here to make my presentation. Because in this very house, Mr. President, in the lower house, Mr. President, where we have parliamentarians whom we believe will set the example for our young people out there. We see parliamentarians who come in the house, they sit there, say nothing, and just instigate ruckus. That is what they do, Mr. President. And that is very sad. That is very sad. And then the ruckus continues amongst our fellow senators up here. We cannot have that, Mr. President. That is very disturbing. On the eve of our 40th anniversary, and we know our national anthem talking about strife and discord. And this is what we are still about. This is what we still do. We come in the Honorable House, and we have every intention, some of us, to continue to create strife and discord in this country.
Now,
Fluctuating overdraft,
honorable
Mr.
member,
President.
now I will step in, because I think you now step into an area I would not like you to go. But you may continue, but just move away from just that part.
Mr. President, I heard my fellow senator talk about independence, and I was saying on the eve of our 40th independence, Mr. President, we talk about the theme remaining the same. Moins c'est Saint-Lucie, c'est là moins sorti. But, Mr. President, when I hear people take a simple statement and come to this house and say that we said we are not going to borrow, and take it out of context, Mr. President, I wish to correct that statement, and I hope that everybody in St. Lucia this time gets it right. We heard today that we said we will not borrow. This administration said they will not borrow. But what we are not hearing, Mr. President, is the rest of that statement. We never said we will not borrow and stayed there. We said we will not borrow unless there is a revenue stream to address that borrowing. Now, that is what I call political mischief. When we say half of the statement and we do not say the rest, and it is being said here in the Parliament, in the Senate, we are hearing it all the time, over and over. It is true that when a person makes a statement and they repeat it over and over, we may at the end of the day just say, we will not borrow. But we know initially when the statement was made, it was that we will not borrow unless there is a revenue stream. So to be repeating only the first part of it and not the second part. So, Mr. President, ça nous ka fè assez. Nous ka mislead Jean Saint-Lucie là nous fè ces bagailles ça là. We mislead the people. Puisque ça nous dit assez, nous pas kay prêter l'argent unless nous savons côté nous ka joindre l'argent ça la vie ouais. So c'est comme ça il dit et c'est comme ça moi vle yo dire. So on nous do bout crier ces moun là puisque nous voulons jouer politics. Mr. President, I also heard, where is Radio St. Lucia, Mr. President? In this honorable house, when we are asking for a fluctuating overdraft, where is Radio St. Lucia? What does that have to do with the request for a fluctuating overdraft? So, Mr. President, I ask, we said more things when Sir John came with the whole idea of a Millennium Highway. And look at it today, and I'm only going to draw reference to this one thing today, that we had so much hoopla over when we decided to build a Millennium Highway. Can you imagine, Mr. President, today, these 40-foot containers trying to maneuver their way up the Mon? The Mon Road is already sinking. There are cracks all over the road, very concerning. And for you to tell me when we conceptualized the idea of building the Millennium Highway, there was so much, so much ruckus and rancor over that. And now we are still hearing DSH. We heard it here again this morning, Mr. President. Not one sitting can go by without you hear DSH. But I want to ask these very same people, and we are talking about climate change. I want to ask them what will happen if one of these unfortunate days we have some natural occurrence that wipe out Maria Islet. What are we going to do? Would that be the end of us in St. Lucia? We are so concerned about the lizards and everything else on Maria Islet. You would think, by the talk going around, that Maria Islet is this huge, asset that we have. Suppose one of these days, these lizards decide through the course of natural selection, they decide this is the end of our reign, and that's it. Let us just suppose. What are we going to do in St. Lucia? What will happen? So we are ready to allow the people of the South to starve. We are ready to allow them to go without work, without jobs. Their children cannot go to school, and you are teachers, you understand how that goes. Their children cannot go to school. Most of them have to leave the South and come down to the North to look for work. Just because we are so concerned about climate change. Because that is what it is. Because climate change is here. It is happening. The coral reefs, I want to know if we are going to take them all out when a hurricane is coming or some natural disaster. We see what is happening in Trinidad with the mudslide, the volcano. We saw the slide in Martinique, everything. Are we going to remove all these things when some natural disaster is about to happen and bring them back into the sea? I wonder, what are we saying and what are we doing? If we were to continue along those lines of thinking, we would never develop this country. You think the investors can come and take the pitons away? I wonder how far they'll take them. To Italy, maybe? I just don't understand the thinking. We are trying to borrow monies for a fluctuating overdraft, and all of this is coming back up. Where does that fit into the scheme of things here in this house this morning? I don't understand it, Mr. President. And I sit here, I listen to all of this rancor, and say to myself, we could have been out of here in about half an hour. We could have been. It's just a simple little motion, Mr. President. And this is a country where things do not stand still. We have to keep working. People have to go back to work. People have things to do. We are wasting resources when we do that. And everything, we turn it into politics. I guess this is why we have coined the phrase. We have coined the phrase. I think the leader of the opposition usually says it better. Political, there's something that he says. No, not political mischief. Some other thing. No. Anyway, our leader of opposition, Philip J. Pierre, he's always saying something about political something. Yeah? So because everything is about politics. Everything. I remember, Mr. President, when I was a senator under the former administration, we have bills we came to the Senate with. The Consumer Protection Bill. We sat, we looked at that bill, there were a few errors, the president, together we went through it, sent it back, and so on and so forth. And in record time, that was finished. Opposition, we in opposition did not just used to oppose just for opposing sake. We used to come and do the business of the people, the business of the day. This is about a fluctuating overdraft. Avec nous là toujours, qu'a just jeté mes puits. As you can see, we did not come with any notes and things there. I just drafted those things because I said I have to respond to all these rockers. Because that is what it is. A fluctuating overdraft. Mr. President. And we say, this is our country. We have to stop playing games with the people here. We have to stop it. We have to move on, develop. We have to grow. The country must grow. We cannot keep trying to protect things that are going to disappear most likely on their own. We need to grow. We need to grow our people. So, Mr. President, I will not keep us here another hour, another half hour, because I don't believe that this is necessary. So I wish to say thank you very much, Mr. President.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as customary, Mr. President, as leader of government business, I will have to respond to some of the comments made or statements made by the members opposite. But Mr. President, before I will start this rebuttal by first saying that in all of my professional life, including this one, Mr. President, I always carry with me my personality and character. And one of the things I will never ever do, and you'll never see me doing, Mr. President, is that of denigrating anybody. And it appeared to the members opposite that I was basically saying to them that I couldn't read. And obviously in the spirit and in the context in which I mentioned to them, I spoke, Mr. President, clearly I was not saying this. The words were mentioned, but that this was not exactly what I meant to say. It was basically saying that if you read, I'm hoping that they would be able to read the resolution and understand what it really says. So if, well not if, but clearly they misunderstood what I meant, and clearly I'm saying to them right now that this is not what I was trying to say to you. Mr. President, there seems to be a pattern by the opposition, a pattern that whenever we get here, they always seem to ask a lot of questions. That's the easiest thing to do. That's the easiest thing to do, ask questions. And questions are relevant. It's important to ask questions, but sometimes people ask irrelevant questions. And sometimes individuals ask questions that they have answers for. And also, they ask questions that they can't actually get answers for. Because, Mr. President, yes, this side is part of the government, but the opposition has access to government. They have access to the various departments, ministries, for the various questions they ask. And they know very well, Mr. President, that some of the questions that they ask, that they can get answers for, they can get it from the various ministries and departments. But they choose to come here, Mr. President, that's the opposition I'm speaking of, and ask all sorts of questions. But Mr. President, we as a government can ask the very same questions too. We can ask, in fact, a lot of questions have been asked in this house of the opposition, and even when the opposition, this government was part of the opposition, asked the government then questions that have never been answered. And I think there is a very important question, Mr. President, that every solution should ask of the opposition. In fact, questions. And these questions should be related to Grindberg. We must bring it up all the time, Mr. President, because lots of questions have been asked of Grindberg, and not an answer has been given to the people of this country. So where do we draw the line in terms of asking questions? Where do we draw the line? So when I hear the question about what will we do with the $55 million, what will we do with it? And that's why, Mr. President, I started this with giving an explanation as to why we are borrowing this money. Why? Why? And I stated that in the appropriations bill, there are 4 sources of revenues. 4 sources. Recurrent revenue, loans, and you have bonds, and you have grants. And nowhere in the appropriation bill it speaks of an overdraft facility. Nowhere. And in fact, Mr. President, when you speak of loans, when you speak of grants, when you speak of bonds, we always state, Mr. President, the source of borrowing, and also why these things, in fact, how we will be able to fund our capital expenditures. in our policy statements. So how can we come here, ask Parliament to approve a resolution for the advancement of this government to borrow $55 million and provide you a policy statement to support this? But I made it clear also, Mr. President, that typically when we meet in Parliament to pass such a resolution, that this resolution is typically to take care of short-term operating expenses, which includes salary. So I don't get the drift as to why still asking the question as to what are we going to use the money for. You will never find any government coming here and outlining to you, giving you line by line and by line as to exactly how the money will be spent. So you're asking a question that you'll never get an answer for. It's not there. But I gave a brief overview as to why the monies are being spent, will be spent. Salaries and operating expenses. And that's it. I hope, Mr. President, I have been able to answer the question for such an answer from the opposition. Now, Mr. President, the Senator Gibeon, the one who said that he has a constituency from Denver South, I think he may have misheard what I said in terms of the balance of the overdraft facility. He said that I said percentage, a 0%. In fact, a balance cannot be a percentage. A balance is supposed to be a figure. So for him to say a balance of 0%, I don't know how that can be. It was a balance of 0. Okay? And he also said, Mr. President, that why couldn't we come here and ask for a reduction in the limit? Oh my goodness. A limit is a limit. A limit is a limit. It used to be 25 million, and his government in 2012 increased that limit from 25 million to 55 million. And why did they do so, Mr. President? Why did they do? I don't know why did they do it, Mr. President? Because they had maxed that 25 million. They had maxed it. And they realized that 25 million overdraft facility was not sufficient. And now they brought it to 55 million. 55 million. But Mr. President, this is the pattern by this government. When the opposition went in government, that's the pattern. Okay, Mr. President? Because they did something very similar. They also increased the limit. They also increased a certain limit. Because, Mr. President, our treasury bills we have a limit as to the amount that we can borrow as far as treasury bills are concerned. A limit. And according to the Finance Act, we can only borrow up to 50% of the previous year's recurrent revenues. Up to 50%. Up to 50% of the previous year's recurrent revenues. They changed that limit. They're the ones who brought to 50%. It used to be 35%. So if you increase it from 35% to 50%, it means that you are able to borrow more treasury bills. And that's exactly what they did. And even as we speak today, our limit is about $500 million, $500 million, and we are almost at that limit. Almost at that limit. So when this government, when the opposition comes in, Mr. President.
Senator Gideon, I may not pay attention, but sometimes I hear. So keep your voice down.
Mr. President, I am used to ignoring noise. In fact, when I'm driving, and don't misquote me now, when I'm driving and the dogs are barking, I keep driving. Don't misquote me now. And that's what this government is doing, you know. This government, Mr. President, this government, Mr. President, one thing I know about us, we are not paying attention to the noise out there. We are focusing on performance. That's what we're doing. And we are performing, aren't we? We are performing. So this opposition, Mr. President, they are in the habit of just increasing limits. Because it's a well-known fact that the Labour Party government, the only thing they know how to do best, Mr. President, is to borrow and spend. Borrow and spend. And evidence is there to see the level at which they have brought our debt. In 4.5 years, almost 5 years, Mr. President, the last administration borrowed $800 million. $800 million, Mr. President. Okay? And that was during a period, Mr. President, when you had world prosperity, economic prosperity. And this, Mr. President, compared to the previous year of the United Workers' Party, previous period of the United Workers' Party government, which performed or which operated during a time of economic depression, coupled, Mr. President, with lots of natural disasters in St. Lucia. And yet still, Mr. President, the performance of the United Workers' Party was much better than that of the last administration. It says something about the philosophy and the ideology and the governance of the United Workers' Party government. Mr. President, and this is just the talk, you know. The figures are there. The figures are there to back it up. And the leader of opposition government business, he rightly said that the skills that are needed during an election campaign is different from that of one that is needed for governance. He is right. He is right. This opposition, Mr. President, they know how to campaign. They know how to campaign. In fact, they lose the election today and they start campaigning tomorrow. And they never stop campaigning. Never stop campaigning. In fact, they have a new tradition now. Every Thursday they have a press conference. It doesn't matter what the government does, we have to criticize. Because we have a press conference every Thursday. It doesn't matter. We're campaigning. What they didn't do, in 5 years, they were expecting this government to do it in 100 days, remember? In 100 days. 100 days. But Mr. President, we are not perturbed. We are not perturbed because I believe we have mature people on this side, on this government, that understand very well what's needed for this country. What's needed. And we are on the move. We are on the go, Mr. President, and we are very happy to see signs of improvement in our economy. In fact, Mr. President, January appeared to be like December. It appeared we had 2 Decembers in 1 year. The amount of economic activity going on in this country. In fact, just about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks to be exact, I was having a meeting with a prominent businessman in this country. Prominent. And he showed me figures. Revenues that he had been collecting. He collected on one single day. And he said in all his life, as a businessman in this country, he has never collected so much money in 1 day in January. And it says a lot, Mr. President. It says a lot. We have seen a reversal of closure of small businesses in this country. We saw it under the last administration, Mr. President. The number of small businesses that closed shop in St. Lucia, particularly in the south. Particularly in the south, Mr. President. But we are seeing, what we're seeing now is just small businesses just popping up like popcorns. Popping up like popcorns. The level of confidence has returned to this country. It has returned. And we have seen the figures. You know, when the numbers for the statistics came out in terms of unemployment, dropping from 20 point something to 16.8, we had a particular member of parliament, MP I should say, yes, who for some reason believed that he understands statistics. Now, Mr. President, I'm not boasting. I taught economics. I also taught statistics. All right? So I may have the advantage of understanding the numbers. But, Mr. President, there are times that I may not know something that is not in my area at all. So what I do, Mr. President, I would ask questions. I will ask questions. Because if you don't ask questions and you believe you know something, you'll end up looking like a fool. You'll expose yourself. And I have seen it over and over and over again by this particular minister, particular MP from Castries South. Over and over. How comes this section, this constituency got 3,000 jobs and so on and so on? But, Mr. President, I want to give us, including this side, just a small assignment and try to read about what is referred to as the power of sampling. The power of sampling, as in statistics, and you'll understand what this is. And if you do understand, and if he does understand, then the kind of questions and noise, Mr. President, that have been made because the Statistics Department just simply reported a 16.8% unemployment in the country, that just threw them off completely. Completely. Because, Mr. President, we are on a path of recovery in this country. The unemployment figures have demonstrated that we are on that path. Based on the forecast that we are seeing for 2017, or not the forecast, but preliminary numbers for 2017, we are seeing that we are improving economically. It's my understanding we are close to about 2% or a little above 2% GDP growth. Unlike the times when we had 3 years of negative consecutive growth in this country. 3 years of negative contraction of the economy for 3 consecutive years. In the face, Mr. President, of heavy borrowings, in the face of a vibrant and robust world economy. Mr. President, even our fiscal situation is improving or has improved. And the numbers will come here very soon. When we come with the debates, we'll have the 2017 Social and Economic Review. And you will see the numbers. You will see the numbers. You'll see the numbers. We are at prudential levels, our fiscal position, prudential levels. And I remember clearly, and I'll talk about it in other debates, I remember clearly that when we came here to debate the appropriations bill, the members opposite, in both the lower and the upper house, they were comparing the budget with the proposed budget with actual numbers, with previous budgets. You can't do that. You cannot do that. I said that. Because what we proposed we will spend is not what will actually happen. And various factors, various reasons for that. So I'll report to you very soon, Mr. President, how we have improved in the economy and also our fiscal position, Now, Mr. President, I know the opposition will not stop talking about the decision that we have already undertaken with regard to Sandals, the $24 million they spoke about. Right? They'll never talk about it, stop talking about it. Again, if the opposition really wants to understand what really happened, the information is there. And that very same minister, MP, I didn't hear much about, say they said anything much, but that particular guy who believes he's bright. Anyway, I'll get there.
Honorable member, do not refer to any member of parliament as this particular guy.
Okay. My apologies, Mr. President. The member for Cash Resolve, Mr. President, I said I will not take this man on. And sometimes you just have to let, I will not take this particular MP on. But Mr. President, I think the time is coming when I have to take him on. And time will take him on too, eh? Time must take him on too. Time will take him on very soon. Time will take him on. But Mr. President, I remember very well that when...
Mr. President. I hate to do this, but sometimes we have a little. Section 37(1), I think you had cautioned one of us to do just that, and I think it would be good that I pointed out Section 37(1), that the subject of the debate should be focused on the motion at present, and I think at the moment my learned friend is kind of going off track, and I don't think it's really good in the interest of the House.
At this present time, the member or leader of government business is summing up his rebuttal. So there's greater leeway in him, in how far I allow him to rebut. So continue, Mr. Leader of Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I do intend to remain within the confines of the motion and also within the confines of the statements and comments that the opposition has made. And of course, I'm strictly rebutting. That's what it is. But Mr. President, Mr. President, you have a situation where every time we come here, and even in the so-called press conferences, they speak of the time when the cabinet decided to exempt or made a decision to have the $24 million be exempted for a particular hotelier, and there have been an assault on this particular investor. And this is not new as far as assaulting and just attacking investors in this country. It's very well known. It's a pattern by the opposition to scare investors to this country. And we are seeing that even with the current proposed development of the South with DSH and others. It's about scaring them away because we have a philosophy as a government to empower people into real jobs. And we believe that the type of investment that we are bringing in or attracting in this country will do just that. And I believe it is one of the biggest fears of the opposition because individuals will no longer be depending on government for jobs, but strictly on the private sector. And that's why, Mr. President, every time and even now, they speak of the step workers that we so-called let go. And I want to say it clearly, Mr. President, the government didn't let go of any step worker. The step workers' contract came to an end, and that is what it was. Came to an end. But the night workers. So, Mr. President, another topic that came up was about the Ojo Labs. But again, with the philosophy and the ideology of this government, we believe that the private sector is best positioned to employ people. Best positioned to employ people. Let's not forget, Mr. President, that the last administration used to borrow on a yearly basis, on average, $19 million. $19 million to fund the salaries of night workers. $19 million, Mr. President. 19. So we are saying that we have no objections that if the government can borrow money and employ people. But if you employ people, ensure that the employment is one that is not recurrent, but it's a sustainable employment. And that is why, Mr. President, we believe that the nice workers, though it was providing them a salary every month or maybe 2 weeks, I don't know what it was, but it was one that the government could not have sustained. So we have said that if we bring in the Ojo Labs, provide some kind of support for a period, a specific period of time for these workers, after that time lapse, Mr. President, these workers will be fully on or completely on the books or salaries of the Ojo investor. That's what it is. And this particular, Mr. President, this particular investment, these individuals, they can decide to go work elsewhere if they want to. These are almost like professional jobs, Mr. President. But unlike the nice workers, not even the bank will want to look at them, or look at them, Mr. President, when they go to look for a loan. In fact, the banks will not honor that they are working for the government on a nice project. But we are saying, no, we can do better than that, Mr. President. So we are trying to attract investments and employers like the Ojo, and we believe they are doing very well, Mr. President. The young people are they feel very proud, of themselves. In fact, we are, according to the Prime Minister, Tuesday right here, Mr. President, more of these individuals will be employed by the Ojo Labs. So we are on track. We are on track. So, Mr. President, I was hoping, as I said earlier, that this motion to borrow by means of advances, $55 million, would have been one that would have spent 10 minutes on, but unfortunately we spent all that time. I'm looking forward to the support of this Parliament to give approval to this motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Honorable Senators, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sum shall be charged on and paid out of the consolidated fund. I now put the question, as many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned, sine die.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Senate do stand sine die. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
Well, we've come to the end of the live sitting of the Senate for today, February 15th, 2018. This was the first sitting for the new year. Independent Senator Dr. Adrian Ogier was the only senator absent from today's sitting. In addition to the papers laid by the Minister, the Ministry of Finance, and Leader of Government Business, Senator the Honorable Ebaldas Raymond, and Minister for Health and Wellness, Senator the Honorable Mary Francis, Senator the Honorable Fortuna Belrose addressed the Senate and outlined the program of activities to commemorate the 39th anniversary of St. Lucia's independence, a celebration which is said is going to be widespread across several communities on the island and will entail several components involving the sports, spiritual, and cultural. She further acknowledged the passing of some of St. Lucian, some of our personalities in the areas of sports and also culture. Most of today's debate was generated on one motion, which was on the order paper, and which sought parliamentary approval for the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of overdrafts from commercial banks, an amount not exceeding $55 million. Of course, that generated much debate, with the opposition adding their voice to it, and the minister, for the leader for government business, sought to justify why this monies were necessary at this time. Well, this is where we wrap up things for today. It was a pleasure bringing you the live broadcast of the first sitting of the Senate for 2018. Until the next time, I'm Julita Peter, wishing you a wonderful day. Thanks for viewing.